So welcome everybody. This is a new REFEDS community chat for those of you that have not been to one of these before. REFEDS is it's a collective of identity federations that work to support research and education institutions around the world. So we're here to enhance collaboration among these institutions by developing and promoting standards, tools, and best practices for federated identity management. REFEDS also provides a platform for its members to share knowledge, coordinate efforts, and influence policy development in the realm of federated identity. And it's that part that's bringing us here today. I'd like to introduce Nick Weber and Thad Carlson from the U.S. National Institutes of Health Center for Information Technology. The NIH is one of the biggest relying parties in the world, and today Nick and Thad are going to talk to us about exploring cloud resources for research in the NIH Cloud Lab. Nick, go for it.
Thank you, Heather, and thanks to Laura and the REFEDS community as well for the coordination. As Heather mentioned, I'm Nick Weber. I am the acting director of the Office of Scientific Computing Services here at NIH's Center for Information Technology. And I also lead the STRIDES program, which we'll talk about here in these slides. We're happy to be here today. We will gladly take any questions you may have. We've worked very closely with broader federation and multi-federation communities to get Cloud Lab and some of these capabilities in place. And we'd love to hear from you and learn from things that you may have done at your institutions or in your collaborations that could be beneficial. And if there's anything that we can do to help bring resources to your communities in newer, better ways, we'd love to hear that as well. Next slide. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a program that we have at the NIH called STRIDES. Specifically, we're going to get into some details about the NIH Cloud Lab, which is accessible to both NIH funded and NIH affiliated, and that's an important term that I'll describe here. Researchers and those seeking NIH funding to be able to work in cloud environments, learn bioinformatics, data science, other biomedical data processing and data management approaches and strategies, and then specifically talk about how we've worked with federations like InCommon and EduGain to enable broader use of these sorts of resources that we host at NIH. And then we'll have plenty of time to discuss, and we have folks who are much more technical than I am. If folks have technical questions, we can certainly kind of dive deep as you might like. Next slide. And Thad, I see you posted that you don't see the slides. I see them, so I'm not sure if that's just
interesting. I see them as well.
Do I have to view someone to see them?
No, they're just generally shared.
Okay, I'll keep looking.
So let me give a little bit of an overview here. As you're probably well aware, cloud has been used more and more to support research, biomedical research, just computing in general, given the opportunities that it provides. Kind of on demand, scale to meet research needs, pay as you go. Don't have to manage the infrastructure locally, which can be helpful in certain parts of the globe. All of those things. So I think we understand the opportunities. I think we've also noticed some challenges with researchers that we support and that we fund at NIH that are around adoption of cloud, associated with how do you set it up and pay for it in this pay-as-you-go manner. What are the security implications and expectations? The training to be able to use a new computing environment that may be different from what you've been using for years or decades even can be a substantial obstacle. And so next slide, NIH has done a few things to try to make those barriers a little lower and to try to help researchers and the broader community get the benefit of cloud computing that you saw on the previous slide while overcoming a few of those obstacles. So we'll talk about STRIDES and then Cloud Lab. So next slide. The STRIDES initiative is an acronym, as you can see there at the top. But essentially what we're trying to do is kind of partner with commercial cloud research or commercial cloud providers to accelerate research that both NIH researchers and NIH funded researchers across the country and across the globe are able to do. So with these partnerships, we've established cost discounts. We've established kind of streamlined access. We've established some training and community programs, really to make it easier for anyone who, again, has an internet connection and can get to a cloud platform to be able to do world-class research. So you don't have to have, local infrastructure, to be able to do computationally and data intensive research. As long as you can get to the cloud, anyone with good ideas can, kind of get the resources, the computing power that they might need. Next slide. And so we've been at this for about, I guess, 6 years now, where you see some of the metrics on the right, but essentially we're trying to kind of level the playing field for researchers, overcome some of those gaps, allow the research community to engage directly with both NIH and with our cloud engineers that support this program at the cloud service provider companies. So we've done, collaborative R&D engagements with AWS and Google and Microsoft to build capabilities into their platforms. And, I think there's been some good adoption. You see the number of research programs nearing 2,500 who've been participating. The research institutions, that's the extramural participants in the bottom, about 200 organizations kind of enrolled and participating to hit those other metrics that you see in terms of storage and compute, and then the negotiated cost savings on behalf of the program. Next slide. And so that's the STRIDES initiative. That is, again, something that any NIH funded researcher and research institution can take advantage of. But what we've noticed is that kind of there may still be some questions about, is the cloud right for my research? How can I use the tools and capabilities that exist in cloud environments to kind of test out various things before committing to kind of moving in that direction? And so we came up with Cloud Lab, which is essentially a way to kick the tires and experiment in the cloud in an area that NIH has established that has both cost controls, security controls, and other kind of testing constraints of $500 in 90 days. And there's a little bit of flexibility there if there are edge cases, but that's the standard for people to come and work in any of the 3 major cloud provider platforms that we partner with. And so you can see kind of the process here to sign up for a Cloud Lab account. Again, this is available both to NIH staff and researchers, NIH funded researchers across the country, as well as those that are actively seeking NIH funding. So for example, if groups are putting in a grant application, and part of that grant application is some budget section that says, well, how much is your data analysis going to cost? And people don't know. We're hoping to use AWS, and we have no idea how much it's going to cost. The Cloud Lab might be a good test bed to go and benchmark some initial analyses and set up some initial infrastructure, so you can empirically say, based on what we did, this is a logical projection, as opposed to guessing or using some of those commercial cost calculators that can be fraught with assumptions and challenges without having any firsthand experience in doing things. Additionally, use cases that we see from customers of Cloud Lab really revolve around expanding what they may have learned in a training and saying, I had this training that was really interesting. I want to go and try something on my own data sets, but I don't have the permission to get a credit card out and use that for my institution to start up, and maybe it's going to take a while to kind of get the broader kind of enterprise level cloud capabilities available to me. So this is where Cloud Lab hopefully can fill a niche for those that, again, just want to test and try things out before making any sort of full commitment. Next slide. One of the major benefits, I think, of Cloud Lab, and this is a testament to our team who you see here, Thad, Ante, others here at NIH, as well as partners, which we'll talk about here briefly, is that there are many rich interactive tutorials that are not only kind of geared toward, okay, here's how you set things up in the cloud, but really that teach the biomedical research, the kind of examples of doing genomics analysis or RNA-seq, or the host of things that you see on the left, including AI/ML and generative AI capabilities, OpenAI and ChatGPT tutorials that exist to be able to test out in the Cloud Lab. And one of the things we've learned here is that, again, most people, especially in the research community, you don't go to the cloud to learn the cloud. You go to the cloud because you want to accelerate your research. So if we can focus on the actual data analyses and working with the data, have tutorials where people can more passively learn the cloud as kind of a research support structure, that's a better way we found to overcome those barriers of lack of understanding or training gap by actively applying things by following a tutorial. And these are all publicly available on GitHub. We have links. Anyone can use them, even if you don't use them through Cloud Lab. You can access these tutorials, use them in your own environments, even non-cloud environments. So if you'd find that valuable, please do check out the tutorials. Next slide. And then I mentioned that we also partner. So our team here at NIH has developed some of these tutorials, but we partner with research programs and with other institutes here at NIH. So NIGMS, that's another NIH institute, the National Institute of General Medical Sciences, has funded through some supplements to a grant program these universities that you see on the screen in something called the Institutional Development Award states, or IDEA states. These are states here in the US that historically receive less funding and are underrepresented in research compared to maybe some of the coasts, the East Coast, Boston, New York, the West Coast, California, Texas, Florida, larger states. And so this was a really interesting program to bring these capabilities to use the Cloud Lab as a way to engage these research programs that have training or other work that they've been doing to bring those into the cloud and provide tutorials for students and others across the country to be able to learn any of these skills that you see: metagenomics analysis, biomedical imaging, et cetera. And then use the Cloud Lab where you can get the $500, the 90 days, the secure guardrails and cost enforcements to test things out. So this has been a great partnership, and we expect to see more of these. We call them modules. These training components that include interactive tutorials. They include quizzes. All sorts of stuff that have become a rich training resource. Next slide. And I think this might be my last slide, and I'll turn it over to Thad, where some folks have been using Cloud Lab for additional purposes. So this might be something to think about for your communities or institutions. We've supported workshops that may kind of coincide with a conference, at the front of a conference that maybe, on a given topic, people can sign up and have some sort of workshop associated with learning cloud or learning one of these topical areas in biomedicine, and kind of get people up and running quickly and easily through some of the automation and again, those guardrails that I mentioned. We've also done this for supporting codeathons and even supporting courses. So there may be a data science graduate course or some other course where you want to have a practical hands-on component. Cloud Lab is a possibility for those situations as well. Next slide. And I think this is again where we'll kind of transition here to Thad. But one of the kind of things we noticed early on when we were setting up Cloud Lab is working with those institutions that you saw on the map on the prior screen. There were some questions around, well, how do we get them secure access into cloud environments that NIH, a government entity, manages, and how do we do identity assurance and validation? And that was something we had to overcome in the prior years as we were rolling out Cloud Lab. And so I'll leave it on this slide for Thad to continue to talk about some of those obstacles, and then talk about how we approached overcoming those obstacles in the different cloud environments. So, Thad?
Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so basically NIH, the vast majority of the the research funding goes to external research organizations. So Cloud Lab's mission really needed to include these extramural users and researchers. So it was really important that we were able to create a solution so that we could federate users into our environment and give them access to these secure, cost-controlled Cloud Lab accounts. So we really had to go about it, and Cloud Lab is across all 3 CSPs, so AWS, Azure, and Google. So we had to make sure that our solutions worked across all these different platforms. And as we got into it, each platform had unique challenges, and we'll talk about that. So, you know, it was quite a technical feat to be able to get this to work in the way that we did. And we worked very closely with all the CSPs to do that. Initially, we started working with InCommon. That was going to be our federation protocol of choice. And what we found is that we did that and we started working with it, and it didn't cover enough institutions because we were working with a lot of smaller universities and they weren't actually partners with InCommon. So we had to work then kind of in a rapid fashion roll out login.gov federation. And so we had both of those. And then eventually, as we wanted to expand Cloud Lab, we used EduGain. And if people aren't really familiar with EduGain, InCommon is the US-based Federation Alliance, and EduGain is the multinational federation. So InCommon is a member of EduGain, but basically all the different Federation alliances come under the umbrella of EduGain, and you're able to basically leverage that to provide access to international users, and we do that. And so basically, we'll see the mechanism here, but when you come and try and work to sign up for Cloud Lab, you get to this page and you have to just click on the research organization box, and that takes you into the process of getting federated into our systems and getting a Cloud Lab account provisioned to you. So we can go to the next slide. And basically, so initially to sign up, you either need to use InCommon or EduGain if you're an international user, or login.gov. So basically we have a logic pattern here. So you come in, you type in on that research organization, and you can see on the bottom here. So this is what you type in and it'll find your university. So in this case, we just brought in someone from Stellenbosch University of South Africa. So you just type in your name, and if your university is part of InCommon, it will pop up. And basically we use your university credentials, including multi-factor authentication, to basically grant access into NIH, to the NIH environment. If for some reason your university is not part of InCommon Federation, then you can type login.gov here, and we use that pathway to get you in, and then you can sign up to have a Cloud Lab account provisioned to you. So that's just the sign up process. So basically we're federating, and this is really key because this process is what inputs users into our virtual directory service. And that is the process that we're going to use for all the other steps, that how we map people and how we provision accounts and grant them access to the cloud providers. So go to the next slide. And each cloud provider had unique challenges. Google was probably we started with Google because we knew it was going to be the biggest challenge. And the challenge with Google is that you need to have a Google identity attached to your email address so that you can actually access the Google Cloud. And most universities didn't natively provide Google identities to their email addresses. And we couldn't create a Google identity, or like we couldn't turn their university email addresses into a Google, like a Gmail account, because that created a lot of, we call them conflict accounts, but it creates problems if that university ever works to implement Google Workspaces and Google identities as an enterprise. So we were like, how do we provide Google identities to these users so that we can get them in and they get them access? And we worked with the Google professional services team, and we created a novel solution. So we were really the first enterprise organization to do this. But what we came up with is a process called shadow identities. And what we do is we create a internal NIH email address and we map it in a secure way to their university. So if someone from John at Johns Hopkins University signs up, they come into our university, we use our virtual directory system and we map it to an internal, it's basically NIH Cloud Lab 001 email address. And then they use that mapping to access, and that internal NIH email has a Google identity map to it. And they use that to get access to the Google console and basically get access to all the services available on Google Cloud. So it's very, it took a lot of technical work to make that happen. There are a couple other key, and I'll have the mapping of that, but so we'll go into that a little bit more. But that was a significant technical challenge. And then just basically for Amazon, it was more of a challenge just from the technical infrastructure of NIH, because we used a tool to basically provide access to AWS, and we had to bypass that tool. So it was just basically some working on the NIH's internal plumbing to grant access to AWS. So we had to clean that up so we could provide access to our extramural users. And then finally, Azure created another challenge because they do not use any of the multilateral federation solutions. So they don't use InCommon, they don't use Edugain, and they don't use logging.gov. It's not natively supported by Azure. So we had to go and use a totally different process to be able to give people access to the Azure platform. And what we ended up with that is that we used Microsoft Federation. So we basically leveraged Active Directory, Microsoft Active Directory, either the on-prem version of it, if enterprises used Active Directory as their on-prem identity provider, or Azure Entra, which is the cloud version of that. And then basically for organizations that don't use Azure, we use their online platform. So let's go to the next slide, because I'll go into these a little bit in more detail. So we just talked about these shadow identities. So this is the mapping process. So we created this mapping, but also the secondary challenge is people log into NIH with that Joe at johnhopkins.edu comes into NIH, and they may have other applications that they use. So if we automatically map that shadow identity, it would screw up basically their ability to access all the other applications within NIH. So we had to basically map a unique login pathway and give people a distinct URL to log in that would reroute them away from the standard NIH login and create a pathway so that they knew that anyone logging in through that pathway should have a shadow identity mapped to them. So it was like a whole separate pathway that was then utilized so that we could use this process. And then so someone could come in and you basically utilize all the other NIH applications that they might be used to using and be able to also have this unique pathway that gave them access to Cloud Lab and to keep them separate. And then additionally, as we didn't want to have any sort of security issues outstanding, we then had to create a life cycle for those shadow identities so that if there wasn't usage, they would naturally be deprovisioned, basically with 90 or 6 months of inactivity, they would basically go away. And so that we wouldn't have any kind of long-term issues having those identities outstanding. So that was basically Google. So let's jump to Azure. So again, basically, since we couldn't use any of our standard tools, we're using Microsoft Federation. And as I said, we leveraged, if an organization basically uses Microsoft as their identity provider, either as Microsoft Active Directory or Azure Entra, which is the cloud-based version of it, we could leverage that basically link that federation method to our Active Directory. And how that's done is people would sign out, and then we would send them an invitation to join our organization as a guest account. So they would basically then get this email, accept the invitation, and then they'd be federated into our Active Directory virtual directory system as a guest account. Now, if an organization didn't use Microsoft Active Directory or their services, then what would happen is that they could accept that invitation by creating a Microsoft online account. So basically, they'd use their johnhopkins.edu account, create a Microsoft online account with that account, and then that would they could accept the invitation, and then they'd be federated into our Active Directory system through that Microsoft Online, and then be able to access their Azure subscription through that process. And again, the guest account lifecycle policy is set at an organizational level. So again, if they don't use their accounts for 3 months or 6 months, that a guest account would basically be deprovisioned and they'd have to re-sign up again. So it basically keeps the security profile quite stringent and allows us to naturally manage all those users that might be coming into our environment. Any questions there? I just said a lot, so I just want to make sure there's nothing out there. If not, we can move to the next slide. So you can see this. So basically, this is just the logic to that. So they fill out the Cloud Lab request. We send them their invitation, and then it does their university use Active Directory. If yes, then they are able to leverage that. They accept the invitation. Everything we do at NIH requires multi-factor authentication. So as long, and most of the times in this case, people use Microsoft Authenticator and they set up their MFA. And then once that they get this secondary authentication, then they get access to their Azure subscription. In some cases, if they already have an Azure subscription at their enterprise, they might need to switch their organizational setting to NIH so they can see the subscriptions, but then they get access. If for some reason they don't have Active Directory, then again, they get set up a Microsoft Online account and then get added into their subscriptions. We can go to the next slide. And so just using this process, it's, we have been deploying these federation solutions at scale. We have over 800 users. I think we're well over 850, maybe 870. And we have about 20 to 50 users sign up per week. A little over 60% are external, and a little under 40% are internal staff researchers. And you can see the split across AWS, Google, and Azure. Google is the largest at this point because of our partnership with NIGMS. They leveraged Google greater than others. And we just started with the Microsoft Azure. So we're really just getting started with the extramural researchers on Azure, but that's really a fast growing. There's a tremendous amount of interest in Gen AI, and we're just seeing that Azure interest take off. So it's been pretty successful across all three platforms. And, we just continue to see the growth of it. We're and actively advertising and promoting, not advertising, but promoting Cloud Lab actively through a number of channels. We're working with the CSPs to help them get the word out around Cloud Lab. And we are starting to see it really take hold, that the universities are developing a cloud working groups and communities around cloud and really moving bioinformatics and life science AI to the cloud. So we're very encouraged by these results. And I think that's it for me. We can go to the next slide, which I think is just our discussion, but we can just open it up there if people have questions or if there's any discussion. But thanks for giving us our time to present Cloud Lab here.
Fantastic. You guys are doing a lot. How many people have actually, or how many organizations have started taking advantage of this?
I have to count the latest, but we were well up over 240 different universities had taken access. And we've been testing the international federation. So I think we have like 5 different countries, mostly in Africa right now. But we basically are able to use all these methods on an international basis.
That's very cool. There's a number of REFEDS community members in Asia and the Asia Pacific. They're definitely going to be interested in this. I'll make sure that they get they're aware of the recording so that they can come watch this. I think they'll be I think you'll get more.
I think we just did have our first request from Asia. So, we're just working on that process, but we're definitely capable and able to do that.
Very cool. Does anyone else have questions? All right. Well, again, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. Oh, Laura, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find my hand, the raise hand thing. I was curious do you have a sense of the breakdown between students using the platform versus, established researchers?
Well, I think on that last page, we had like 460 like Google. So basically we partnered with those institutions that Nick mentioned on the previous slide, and they developed tutorials, and then they brought students through that. We've also had 3 different workshops that Nick mentioned, which was about 100 users. And so I would say that it's probably been 1/3 are traditional researchers and 2/3 students of the extramural accounts. So that's roughly, a little over 500. That split would be 1/3 kind of researchers, 2/3 students. And then the internal ones would be much more oriented to researchers.
It's such a great idea to have it so that to use it in the context of workshops and tutorials. It can be prohibitive to do all that sign up and like setting up cloud accounts and those kinds of things for those short-lived reasons. And it's just great to have this as a resource.
Yeah, and it's really great because we found, especially for those tutorials, that they're very cost efficient. The data sets are they're smaller in size because it's about learning the bioinformatic flows. But literally the tutorials can be run for like between $2 and $10 per tutorial. So it's a very cost efficient learning tool. So we've been really happy about, like literally hundreds of people can use these accounts, and the cost is not that great. So it's a very, very efficient tool especially for courses, for workshops, and for codeathons.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing there to say that, historically we've always seen, kind of this hesitancy to say, well, this is different. There's a cost associated with it. I'm going to spend way more money than I have, so I'm not even going to try it. And I think this product, a set of resources, helps people to kind of feel more comfortable and test it out, knowing that they're not going to kind of wake up to a $5,000 bill that somebody's going to have to pay, right? So that's been a big boon to having people want to come and try things out. And then the second part I'll mention is we were fortunate that as the generative AI kind of boom has been happening, the cloud providers excuse me, are the ones that provide access to these large language models like OpenAI, or Google has Gemini, AWS has all the Anthropic models. And the challenges in organizations are often, well, we don't want to have our data and our prompts out there on public models to be kind of training those models, or having our data kind of exposed. And so one of the benefits of Cloud Lab that we've also seen is this is inside of our kind of our network, our boundaries. We have all the settings so the data don't go back into any of the models or services. And it's really enabled our staff and those who are using Cloud Lab even outside of NIH to test out how does generative AI actually work? How can I try out what does Gemini do different from OpenAI, different from Claude, right? And so that's been a benefit as well. I can see as additional technologies get rolled out that are accessible through cloud platforms like quantum computing, access to quantum computers through the cloud marketplaces, for example. Cloud Lab will be another pathway, hopefully, that will enable researchers to test that out as well. $500 may not go as far with a quantum computer, so we may have to evaluate the cost there, but at least it's a pathway to get people testing these capabilities and seeing what it can do for research and discovery, and hopefully benefit to all of us. So we're excited to be able to offer things like this, and we would love to hear from the broader community as to what else might be helpful to engage with you all, with your constituents, to partner further. So again, thanks for this opportunity to the group.
Can I ask one
Absolutely.
more question?
Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, so I was at a talk. Well, it was a small conference for minority serving institutions, and there was a grant. I think it was, well, I don't know who gave the grant, but anyway, there was a grant. I think it was an NSF grant to increase the cyber infrastructure capabilities of these smaller institutions that generally don't have it. And one of the things they presented at this conference was I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's NAIRR pilot, which stands for the National Artificial Intelligence Research Resource Pilot. And some of it sounds similar to like the AI resources that you're talking about. And I'm wondering if those two efforts are connected in any way.
You're clairvoyant, and we probably should have something associated with this in a slide. But yeah, we are now the third NAIR classroom partner. So we can grab a link. I don't know if Rachel or Michelle may have ready access to that link, but this was just announced. And yeah, people can use the Cloud Lab as part of the NAIR, the National AI Research Resources Program, that's partnered with, it's led by NSF, but it has NIH, DOE, other US agencies as part of that. Yeah, the Cloud Lab is a mechanism where people can test out some of those AI capabilities as part of the NAIR classroom. So thank you for bringing that up. I think maybe we even created these slides before that announcement was out, very recent. But yeah, good call on the connection.
All right. Do you have any other questions? All righty then. Well, Nick, Thad, everybody working on Stride, thank you so much for this. The recording's going to be posted within the next few days, and I look forward to hearing more about where this goes in the coming months.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.